Mr. Roy is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Majority Leader.
I thank the Speaker. I come here to the floor recognizing the state of affairs that we find ourselves in, given the extent to which the President of the United States and his radical progressive Democrat allies on the other side of the aisle here and in the Senate are continuing an assault on the well-being of the American people with open borders, with inflationary spending, with radical environmental agenda policies that are regulating the economy to death, driving up the cost of goods sold, and overall diminishing America in the world. There's no other way to view it than intentional. That kind of an assault on the well-being of the American people deserves to be met with the kind of resistance that the American people who sent us here to represent them expect. The American people who sent at least Republicans here to be in the majority to stand athwart the radical policies of the Biden administration, supported by our radical progressive Democrats here in this House and in the Senate. They sent us here to stand athwart those policies. Therefore, it is our duty, it is incumbent upon us to actually do so. Last year, when given the majority, a number of us set out to change the way the House of Representatives works, or should I say, was not working. We set out to make sure that bills can be read, that you have 72 hours to review a bill. We set out to ensure that you would have adequate and varied representation on the various committees. We set out to ensure that there would be a process by which we could move appropriations bills out of committee onto the floor, from the floor to the Senate, so that we could pass individual bills. Try to restore what we might call regular order. We set out to do that last year. We passed 7 appropriations bills out of the House, 3 more from the committees down to the floor. 2 others were ready to go. We passed H.R. 2, the strongest border security bill that has ever been moved off of the House floor. We passed Limit, Save, Grow, which would elevate the debt responsibly while making policy changes to try to drive down the amount of debt that we're racking up on a daily and weekly basis. Those are the things we're able to accomplish as Republicans when we were honoring the commitments that we made to our constituents and we were not hiding. Unfortunately, today, Republicans are hiding. They are hiding behind the fear of so-called shutdown and hiding behind the so-called razor-thin majority to pass a massive omnibus spending bill, the second part of a 2-part omnibus spending bill that blows past the spending caps passed on a bipartisan basis, increases the spending over the very levels perpetuated by Nancy Pelosi that virtually every Republican in this chamber opposed not 15 months ago. They are about to pass legislation that will blow past those caps and spend more money. And they are going to do so knowing full well that we are not achieving the vast majority, barely any, of the policy changes that we fought for all last year in the appropriations process. That's the actual truth. We are going to abandon the efforts that we set out to change this chamber last year, and we are doing it violently. We got a bill this morning that is over 1,000 pages long, $1.2 trillion, and we're expected to pour over it in 1 day, in 24 hours. We are still uncovering ridiculous uses of taxpayer funds. The American people are about to learn what some of those are. But not only are we abandoning what we accomplished last year to try to take the House back, make the House work again, but we're abandoning the people of this country The hardworking American people right now today who are looking at their Congress and saying, what are you doing? The ones who sent us here, who are seeing their country being taken away from them right before their very eyes and seeing their way of life being eviscerated. This isn't about holding on to power. We are not sent here to accumulate power. We are not sent here to run for re-election. We are sent here to do something. We are sent here to fight for the people who sent us here. And what we're doing right now is looking at a country that we love, a country that is being destroyed, throwing up our hands as Republicans and saying that apparently it's just not worth the fight because we might have a poll that looks bad because of shutdown. That's what we're telling the American people. Instead of using the power of the purse to force change, as was stated by James Madison in Federalist Paper 58, the House of Representatives can not only refuse, but they alone can propose the supplies requisite for the support of government. They, in a word, hold the purse, that powerful instrument, all the overgrown prerogatives of the other branches of government. This power over the purse may in fact be regarded as the most complete and effectual weapon with which any constitution can arm the immediate representatives of the people for obtaining a redress of every grievance and for carrying into effect every just and salutary measure. Those were the words of James Madison, the father of the United States Constitution, when he was arguing for the adoption of the Constitution. He was saying that this body, the one that I'm standing in right now, the House of Representatives, through the power of the purse, is the only body in the world that can restrain the power of the executive branch, the President of the United States. We, this body, in concert with the Senate, of course, hold the power to check an out-of-control president. Is the President of the United States and the people who work for him in this administration out of control? Yes. How do we know this? Because the President of the United States goes to the microphone and says he's going to ignore the United States Supreme Court when the Supreme Court says you cannot do what you're doing against the law with respect to student loan bailouts. The President of the United States is ignoring his duty and his oath of the Constitution to defend the border of the United States using policies meant for very narrow exceptions for asylum and parole to blow open the border and endanger the American people. That is tyrannical activity, an abuse of power, endangering the people that we represent. That's what is happening. That's what the president is doing. A president who has abused his power at the FBI and in the intelligence agencies. That's what's happening. And what is the response from Republicans? Crickets, a yawn, a whimper, because they're afraid that someone might cry shutdown. They're afraid that they might lose their precious, that election certificate that I think apparently is what gives some people in this body their worth. But an election certificate is only as good as the people that we are here to represent. And they sent us here to do something, to change the place. Today, in Texas, more than 100 illegal aliens charged past the Texas National Guard. The state I represent is on fire and trying to pick up the pieces as the federal government refuses to do its job, and we saw it unfold today in real time. And what are my Republican colleagues going to do? Give the President and the Department of Homeland Security and the impeached Homeland Security Secretary more money. Someone explain that to me. Someone explain to me how any Republican can, over the next 6 months, go out and campaign against Joe Biden's open borders when they're writing the check. And they're going to do it tomorrow, right here on the floor of this body. They're going to write him the check and say, here you go, Mr. President. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Yes, I inserted Animal House. This bill does not include one single policy necessary to secure the border. And I'm tired of hearing Republicans go to the microphone, whether they're in leadership or rank and file, and say otherwise, because it's not true. I've heard Republican leadership go down and talk about ice beds. Oh, don't worry, Chip, we increased the ice beds. Are you telling the American people that the ICE memos that this administration have in full force basically make it impossible for ICE to do their job? That those beds will therefore not be filled? Oh, but Chip, that's for future President Trump to use. President Trump can increase the ICE beds to what he had when he was president before, which was as many as 57,000 beds. This is nonsense. It's nothing, but it's worse than nothing. It's actually worse than nothing. Because my same Republican colleagues who go out to the microphone and say, we are going to increase Border Patrol. First of all, good luck recruiting more Border Patrol agents right now. They can't even achieve the numbers that they're currently at 17 or 18,000. No, in our bill we say, oh, don't worry, we're going to be at 22,000 Border Patrol agents. Guess how our Democratic colleagues characterize that amazing feat of negotiation that Republicans carried out? They characterized it as expediting the processing of more illegals, because you know what? At least they're honest about it. That is exactly what it would do. You're going to give more funding for more Border Patrol agents to process more illegal aliens who are overrunning our border, overrunning our cities, overrunning our hospitals, overrunning our jails, overrunning our schools, driving mass crime into our communities, resulting in the death of Laken Riley, resulting in the death of Kayla Hamilton, resulting in the death of too many people for me to sit here and mention. And Republicans are going to go cower in the corner tomorrow, wring their hands, and say, we can't talk about a shutdown. That's what's going to happen. And meanwhile, we're going to go out this summer and do what? 80th anniversary of D-Day. Let's go give some speeches over in Normandy. What, you're so proud of those young men who walked into a wall of bullets and went up a cliff so that you could give your country away? With billions of dollars to an administration that's going to allow every single thing they fought for to get whittled away. That's the truth. Every Republican tomorrow and Democrat, every Republican tomorrow who votes for this abomination of a bill will personally own the mass release of illegal aliens in violation of law, because you're funding it, on top of 4.5 million releases so far and almost 2 million gotaways so far. You vote for this, you own it. You own the release of illegal aliens with notices to appear in court as far out as 2035 and growing, and limited knowledge to where they even are. You own it. You own the unlawful mass parole programs, the use of the CBP One app. The funding you're voting for tomorrow will fund that. Of over 1 million individuals, including the known member of a Venezuelan prison gang who violently murdered Laken Riley. You own that. It's not good enough to pass a bill last week and name after Laken Riley and then come here and write the check to the very people who are responsible for allowing it to occur. You own bringing the chaos in Haiti to the shores of America via the Cuban and Haitian and Nicaraguan and Venezuelan parole program. You own that. The Haitian migrant who raped a 15-year-old disabled girl who was here as a migrant in Massachusetts. You're funding that. The dismantling of the migrant protection protocols that were effective under the previous president, you're funding that. You're funding the halt of the wall construction. You're funding the legal attacks on the state of Texas for standing up to try to secure our border, even as our National Guard get overrun. You are funding that if you vote for this bill tomorrow. Texas has had to spend over $12 billion of its own money. I can tell you what you're not funding. You're not funding paying Texas back. And I'm talking to my Texas delegation friends now. Are you literally going to go home to Texas when your own National Guard are getting overrun? Your own state is not getting paid back. We're not getting any policy changes. You're going to increase the debt, and you're going to go try to sell that garbage to the people of Texas? Spare me when I see you campaigning this year on border security. It's a fraud. It's a fraud for Republicans to campaign on border security while you fund it. You fund the lawlessness. You fund the open borders. You fund the death of Laken Riley. You fund the fentanyl pouring into our communities and killing our kids. You own the DHS memos, policies, and rules that restrict Border Patrol's ability to do their job. You own it. You own the continued exploitation of unaccompanied minors, the little girls getting sold into the sex trafficking trade, the 85,000 children that were lost by the very Office of Refugee Resettlement that you will fund tomorrow. You own it. Don't campaign against it and then write the check. You own the funding for the sanctuary cities that refuse to cooperate with immigration law enforcement, which, by the way, are hamstrung in the first place by an administration that doesn't care about the law. You own it. Don't go complain about sanctuary cities. You're funding it. And it's worse, as I said before, because DHS gets more money. They get an increase in funding, not to change the policies, but to give Border Patrol the ability to process more people quickly, which means more people come to the border. The Defense Department is also attached to this total capitulation on our border. We continue to fund a woke Department of Defense in the wake of a weak National Defense Authorization Act passed in December, which, by the way, we were promised by Republican leadership was just one step. Just get past that, don't worry, then we'll fight on spending. Well, if this is what fighting on spending looks like, I'm not sure why you bother flying to Normandy to go regale those who have the courage to go walk into a wall of bullets and scale a cliff to defend America and go fight against Nazi Germany. And this is what we do? Is this what we do when our hour is before us? We will be funding and therefore own, if you vote for this bill, Biden's illegal Department of Defense abortion travel fund. You own it. And by the way, all you social conservative groups out there, all you so-called pro-life groups, where the hell are you? Crickets, silence, because you care about political power more than the very thing you say you're for. And you know who you are. Transgender surgeries at the Pentagon. Where are the social conservative groups? Cowering in the corner. Woke DEI offices across the Pentagon destroying the military morale. You can't even recruit anybody to the Pentagon anymore. You're funding it. Don't complain about it while you're funding it. Woke DEI offices, Biden's climate change executive orders undermining our warfighting capabilities. You're funding it. The Deputy Inspector General for Diversity and Inclusion, Extremism in the Military. You're funding it. You own it. The Department of Defense's ability to classify Americans' communication as misinformation. You're funding it. You own it. State and foreign operations are part of this bill. We're going to export the radical progressive Democrats' woke agenda abroad, and you're going to pay for it. While we rack up $1 trillion of debt every 100 days, you're going to take that borrowing, undermine your own dollar, drive up your own inflation, funding the bureaucrats who are carrying out this agenda. Congratulations, America. That's what your House of Representatives is doing, and that is precisely what you will have Republicans campaigning against after they funded it, after they own it. I will give credit where it is due. Republican leadership, led by the Speaker, negotiated to defund UNRWA. Well, it's about dang time. Some of us were calling for that 3 years ago when we introduced legislation to do it. We had 8 Republicans who voted against defunding UNRWA in September in the appropriations package. But guess what? October 7th was one of the most horrific attacks on one of our friends in the history. And we realized what many of us already knew, UNRWA was right there involved. UNRWA was funding it. The United Nations World Refugee, they were funding it. So congratulations. We defunded an entity that is funding terrorists against our friends Israel. Good. Let's put one over here in the win column, this green checkbox. Congratulations, Republicans, you did it. You did something that you can actually go sell. But, sorry to say, you're still funding the World Health Organization, which wants to take away American sovereignty, that worked to force COVID, tyranny on the American people, force it down the throats of the American people, and in the process of negotiating a new pandemic treaty that would massively expand its reach, you funded it. Congratulations, you own it. You own the World Health Organization. You own the dystopian United Nations Population Fund, targeted at basically exterminating people. Congratulations, you own it. And again, to all you social conservative groups out there, thanks. The Gender Equity and Equality Action Fund and LGBTQ envoys, border security for Jordan and Pakistan. You're funding border security for Jordan and Pakistan, but you're not doing anything to secure the border of the United States. You own it. The Climate Czar office, formerly occupied by John Kerry, flitting around the planet in his private planes, you paid for it. You own it. You're funding it. $3.8 billion for the migration and refugee assistance programs while our southern border is not secure. Think about that. Again, to my Republican colleagues who vote for this bill, you're going to, I know you are, people go follow you around, you're going to campaign against all of these things. I guess you're going to go all in Texas Hold'em style on President Trump and say, well, it's going to take President Trump to save us. How's that separation of powers thing working out for you? Did you skip that part of civics? That we're a co-equal branch of government? Oh, but Chip, we can't do that. We need a president to save us. Why the hell are you in Congress? We're actually supposed to be more important than the President of the United States. That's why we're Article 1. But we're too chicken to use the power. The most powerful tool that we have. These guys can't do what they're doing to the American people and to our country without the money to do it. And not only are we giving them the money, we're giving them more money, and we're borrowing to do it at extraordinary rates. Does anybody be reminded that we are now spending more on our interest on the debt than we are on defense this year? But all of the hawks in here who are totally happy selling out our country vote by vote so they can go home and say they brought home a troop pay raise, great. But you're now spending more on interest than you are on the Pentagon. And in 2 years, you're cracking $1 trillion in interest. The president's budget that he just sent to us has us spending more on interest over the next decade every year than we do on defense. Congratulations. Republicans, you own it. How about the FBI headquarters? Good job, Republicans. You went out and campaigned when we passed the last omnibus bill and said, we got cuts to the FBI, went out and sold that. First of all, it was bogus. The vast majority of the cuts came from one earmark from a building in Alabama that Richard Shelby got last Congress. He's no longer here to defend, so you axed it and then claimed you had some massive cut to the FBI. That's called swamp politics. But now, in this omnibus spending bill, guess what? We go ahead and fund the new FBI headquarters. So who cares that the FBI just massively spied on the American people? By the way, we haven't done anything about that except for extend their powers through the continuation of FISA without actually putting in a warrant to protect warrantless searches. Oh, we haven't done that yet. Put that over there as another thing Republicans own, continued spying on Americans without warrants to protect them. Good job. What, are you going to go check that campaign box this year? We're going to go make sure that FISA is no longer abused by the FBI. We're going to protect you. But we're not going to do it when we have the power to do it. $200 million to the FBI for its new headquarters. We don't prohibit the Treasury from establishing a central bank digital currency, which we did in the House bill. Now, somebody tell me, how can you not negotiate to stop the formation of a central bank digital currency? One of the most pernicious assaults on freedom that you could possibly have. We couldn't even stand up as Republicans to demand that stop. We passed it here in the House. The Senate didn't want it, apparently, or the Biden administration didn't want it. So in our grand negotiation, we didn't even do that. Do you know what a central bank digital currency can do? It can totally shut your life down based on whatever they choose to prioritize. Using too much gas because you didn't get an electric vehicle? Nope, sorry, we're shutting you down. Buy too much ammo this month? Nope, shutting you down. The Chi-Coms do this on a regular basis. We're trying to get in front of that, thinking that maybe the basic foundational principles in the Constitution matter. But nope, we couldn't even negotiate that. So congratulations, Republicans. You own the continued ability of the executive branch to work up the formation and creation of a central bank digital currency. Congratulations, you own it. No prohibition on the funds to invest in so-called ESG in the federal thrift savings plan, which we had gotten adopted, got punted. No prohibition on funds for federal employee health insurance plans to cover the cost of transgender affirming care. Guess what, Republicans? You own it. You're paying for it. Go home to your colleague, your constituents, and explain to them how excited you are to take their tax dollars and then add to that a bunch of borrowing to fund transgender affirming care. Good job. You own that. No prohibition on implementing Biden's climate change EOs. No government-wide prohibition on vaccine mandates. A few partial ones. We always want to be fair. There was a note in the bill that moderately defunded the COVID vaccine mask mandates. There was some modest defunding of the Wuhan lab in the DOD bill, but in the vast majority of it over at HHS, all were the stuff in there that was carried out. Right there, it's still there. Congratulations. We shut down the biggest economy in the history of the world. We racked up $8 trillion of debt. We put our kids behind, now to the tune of trillions of dollars of economic harm, all because we allowed the Wuhan lab to be abused, which we funded. And guess what? We're still funding it. Republicans own it. Don't go out and campaign against the China virus or the Wuhan virus or the Wuhan lab. You own it. You're funding it right now, today. You're doing it. House Republicans have aggressive cuts to HHS last year, but now we're going to give a $1 billion increase. We're still funding the student loan Ponzi scheme. You go out and you go criticize President Biden and the student loan program, ignoring the Supreme Court. You're funding it. Gender-affirming surgeries and drugs. You're funding it. Research with aborted fetal tissue. You're funding it. HHS and DOL DEI offices. You're funding it. President Biden's radical anti-worker agenda. You're funding it. You're funding the Wuhan lab. Again, I'd like to give a shout out to the social conservative groups out there for being so invested in life and DEI and all the issues involving, say, aborted fetal tissue, that you're doing nothing about this bill because you like power. Earmarks. We banned earmarks at one point. The previous omnibus spending bill had something like 6,000 or something earmarks. I don't even know. It's hard to keep count. This one, and it had a bunch more because it was transportation. Everybody loves to get their little bridges and their roads and stuff, but they're always like bike paths and all sorts of crazy stuff, named after crazy people, using your money. I'm not sure where that is in Article 1, Section 8, but whatever. The bill contains 1,400 earmarks, this one does, for $2 billion. Now you think, oh, it's just an earmark. I'm a member of Congress. I don't want to let a bureaucrat decide this. I get to decide how this is spent. I get to bring home something to my district that is so critically important to the well-being of my constituents, because that's what they all say. That's what they say when they bring back earmarks. Chip, we know how to do this better than the bureaucrats. Why would you stand in the way of these all-knowing congressmen to make the right decisions for their constituents rather than turning over that power to the bureaucrats? Okay, let's see how that's working out for you, America. $156,000 for the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective, an organization self-described as champions of, I don't know how many letters I got to put here together, LGBTQIA+ equity, and provides training on LGBTQ+ cultural competency and accessing health care for LGBTQ+ youth. Well, that's a good use of money. $1.1 million for an EV innovation hub. While EVs pile up on all the car dealerships around the country, while we fund the Chinese to make sure that they're enriched while we kill natural gas and kill energy in this country and make it harder for Americans to work. But I digress. We did a really cool bill today on energy, so everything's good. $2 million, Oregon clinic that provides hormone therapy to kids. $850,000 for LGBTQ senior housing in Massachusetts. Yes, gay senior housing. Good job, Republicans. That's what you're funding. $400,000 for Briar Patch Youth Services in Wisconsin. One of their programs is called Teens Like Us, LGBTQIA2S, whatever that is, with a gender-affirming clothing program for ages 13 to 18. You're funding it. You own it. $400,000 to the Garden State Equality Education Fund in New Jersey. Helps minors transition genders, promote biological boys playing girls' sports and using the same restrooms. Congratulations, Republicans. You own it. $5 million for Mary's Center for Maternal and Child Care in Maryland does transgender procedures. Quote, Mary's Center can serve as your home base during the transition process. Congratulations, Republicans. And again, special shout out to all you great social conservative groups out there just whistling Dixie while this is happening. $1 million for the Inner City Muslim Network, which calls for the destruction of Israel. So guess what? We're going to go send an invitation for Bibi Netanyahu to come address a joint session right here in this body, and I'm sure we'll get up and everybody will wear a little Israel pin and we'll go, yay, Israel, we love Israel. And, then let's go give $1 million to the Inner City Muslim Network, which calls for the destruction of Israel. Good job, Republicans. You own it. $1.6 million for Cape Cod electric buses. Cape Cod electric buses. $350,000 for theater programs, $567,000 for an inclusive playground. What is an inclusive playground? We're 34, man, when I was a kid, an inclusive playground was a bunch of bars that basically were about 150 degrees in the summer heat that you scalded yourself on while you're hanging up over a bunch of asphalt and taking your life into your own hands. It was equal stupid, but fun. This, I don't even know what an inclusive playground is. But there he is, $567,000 of money printed right out of thin air. Here you go. $650,000 for the Dartmouth, Hitchcock, Nashua, New Hampshire, also provides late terms abortion. Shout out again to the social conservative groups, completely MIA. $740,000 for increasing diversity in state hiring for the state of Maryland. Maryland can't figure out how to fund their own diversity programs without getting a federal grant out of printed money. $870,000 for a group that wants to defund the police in Connecticut. So Republicans who get up and rant about police being defunded are going to fund the defunding of police in Connecticut. You can't make this stuff up. You can't. $655,000 for Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition, Inc. I don't even know what that is. I could keep going. I could keep going. The American people did not send us to Washington to continue down the road of destruction for the greatest country in the history of the world, for which so many men and women have died to defend and protect it. Cherry blossoms are all exploding. We go walk down by the tidal basin. We walk down by the Jefferson Memorial. We'll read all those words. We walk across by the Lincoln Memorial, go across the Memorial Bridge to what? 400,000 tombstones on the other side of the Potomac for those who either actually gave the last full measure of devotion or were willing to do it and survived and came back and were buried there. What did those 400,000 give that last full measure of devotion for? It wasn't for this. And yet Republicans campaign on it all the time and then fund it. I don't know how to go back to the people that I represent in Texas and tell them that while the National Guard had 100 illegal aliens bum rush them in El Paso, while we've got young women like Laken Riley getting killed by somebody released on mass parole, while a 2-year-old right outside of the nation's capital gets killed by someone let out on mass parole by this administration, ignoring the laws, endangering our people, undermining our sovereignty, I want to know for the life of me how a single Republican can look with a straight face at the people that they represent and say that funding that is consistent with their oath to the Constitution, consistent with their duty to the people they represent, consistent with the fiscal responsibility they campaign on, consistent with the border security that they campaign on. I want to know how they do that. If any Republican votes for this omnibus spending bill tomorrow, he or she owns it, owns every one of those funding priorities, owns the open borders, owns the woke Pentagon, owns the recruiting chaos at the Pentagon, owns the World Health Organization continuing to be funded to undermine our sovereignty. This omnibus bill is the anti-American sovereignty omnibus bill, and Republicans should not vote for it. We didn't come here for more of the same while our kids have to inherit $34.5 trillion of debt and another $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. There will not be a country left to stand next to Israel. There will not be a country left to help Ukraine. There will not be a country left for our kids to inherit if you're borrowing, mortgaging their future, all to pay for open borders, undermining our sovereignty, world organizations designed to undermine our sovereignty, all purposeful, while my colleagues sit back and go, gosh, I hope President Trump wins, and I hope President Trump comes in, and that he'll save us. And as one individual was arguing with me here on the floor today, when I said, why are we doing this? Well, we can't have a shutdown. We would lose. Well, boy, that's courageous. But okay. What if I accept your premise? What if I accept your premise that we can't do this because we have a thin majority in the House and we don't have the Senate, we have a radical regime in the White House? Let me accept your premise. I've been around the block here in town a couple of times. What happens next January? Say Republicans run the trifecta and Republicans win the White House. President Trump's coming back in. We have the Senate with, say, 52 or 3 seats, and we have a 10-seat majority or 15-seat majority here in the House. Then what? Someone tell me, then what? Because I've been there before. We were there in 2017, and we didn't repeal Obamacare, and we didn't pass health care reform. We were there in 2018, and we didn't pass border security. Good lat 1, good lat 2. We couldn't figure out what we were doing. We didn't do it. And what I said to this individual on the floor today was, I said, you know what the excuse will be? We don't have 60 in the Senate. And that individual said, well, we got to have a conversation about that. Because that individual knows full well that the same excuses being levied right now to foist this monstrosity, this abomination on the American people, will be the same excuse in January. We can't shut down the government. You need 60 votes in the Senate, Chip. Don't you understand? Yeah, I do understand. So do the American people. And they're tired of it. They're tired of having their country traded away day by day, second by second, while our National Guard gets stormed at the border at El Paso and we don't do anything about it. But we walk around wearing little pins, feeling good about ourselves as members of Congress who refuse to stand up and defend the very Constitution that gave us the power to do something about it. Instead of deferring to the president, we are supposed to use the Article I power of under the Constitution to stop funding an executive branch that is at war with its own people. We came here to change it. Last year we started to. We were working together to change this place, to vote bills off the floor, to have single subject bills, and to have 72 hours, a mere 72 hours to read a bill. And in just over a year, we've tossed all of that out the window and we're back to business as usual. Jam a bill through in 24 hours, it's over 1,000 pages, that's $1.2 trillion, littered with all manners of sin and earmarks and spending and programs that are undermining the well-being of the American people. We're still figuring out what's in it. So tomorrow, Republicans have a choice. You can choose to fund an executive branch at odds and at war with the American people that you represent, or you can choose to say no. If you refuse to say no, if you go along to get along, you own it. You own every penny. You own every program. You own every American who gets harmed by open borders. So don't dare come looking for sympathy as you're trying to campaign all year, trying to win votes, when your constituents come up to you and say, well, why in the hell did you fund it? Because you did. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to yield some time to a colleague of mine so that he can, I think, regale a basketball team or talk about some good stuff back home, which is always a good thing to do.